Hey guys, welcome to the show. For today's episode of Himprovement, we have on another special guest. His name is Timothy John Harrison, aka Coach T. He grew up in San Diego, California, where he established his roots as a star basketball player. He was blessed to earn a full-ride Division I basketball scholarship to Rice University here in Houston. While at Rice, he branched out into psychology research, community leadership, and entrepreneurship. And while in school, his most valuable lessons came through facing failures and adversity in his athletic career. And so ahead of him were the opportunities to play pro basketball in the Philippines or accept a prestigious job offer in strategy consulting. After graduating in the middle of a pandemic and widespread social unrest, he woke up to the fragility of life and persisting inequalities. Being a man of faith, he felt called to make a difference and decided to take a leap to pursue his life mission to inspire and equip people to realize their potential. Thanks for coming to the show, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Sounds good. All right. So what motivated you to start coaching?
I think what motivated me to start coaching is like I've always been into personal development, right? And so ever since a young kid, I was pretty shy but I was observant and I was always interested in like why people did what they did. So fast forward to college, I studied psychology, and ironically enough, my coach gave me a book to read. I didn't really read a whole bunch kind of coming in, but he gave me a book called The Energy Bus. And he's the head coach. I'm a freshman on the team. So I'm like, okay, yeah, there's no way he's going to give me this book and I don't read it. So I read it, and that just like opened everything up. I read this book, and it's about how, even the negative experiences can be used as positives and different ways you can view the world. And it was one of the first times where I really just read something and it immediately changed everything, changed the way that I view things, shifted the paradigm. And I was like, oh, okay, that's why everybody's saying, okay, this reading thing is good. And so I understood it once I was able to apply it to my life. And from there, I just became a junkie for just like finding those pieces of wisdom that really change everything. And I saw, even in a short amount of time, how when I started to do that, it changed how people responded to me. It changes how I responded. It changed everything about my world without anything in my world actually changing. So I learned that if I change my own internal world, I change the external world around me and how I'm able to operate in it. So then from there, like that passion, when it came around to graduating and I, changed this pathway, I was like, I want to do that for other people and find a way. And so I was exposed to coaching while I was in college, and that really made a difference for me. And I was like, okay, I want to learn that. I want to have that kind of impact on people. So let me be more intentional about it, and let me learn like actual skills and competencies. And it's been awesome thus far.
Okay. So you would say that the thing that motivated you to start doing your coaching was just seeing the effect that personal development had on your own life, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I wanted to impact other people. And I was like, okay, well, how have I been impacted? What are the most impactful things? And then like, how can I do that? How can I replicate that for other people as well? And along with it being exposed to it myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so just based on your own personal development, what would you say the impact has been so far from you doing your own reading, listening to content and other things to improve your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's huge. I'm a completely different person, or I'm just more of who I am than I would have otherwise been. I think that when you have um, the way I think about my personal development is like three phases. You have input, you have output, and then update, right? And so like input is the things that you read, things that you observe, things that are in the external world that come inside, right? Whether it's an audiobook, the music you listen to, that's your mental diet. Output is what do you do based on that, right? So it's one thing to just learn to read a whole bunch of books, to read a lot of books. It's another thing to apply it. So what is it? What input am I actually creating an output from? And then you got to update, and that's about reflecting. It's like, okay, well, I just read this book. This author is great, but how much of what they say is actually me? Because I don't ever agree with 100% of anything I read or anyone I meet with. You don't agree with everything they say, right? So that's the process of distilling what is outside of me and what is in me. What do I want to integrate and what do I want to continue to act out? So that's kind of how personal development has impacted me, but I can truly say it changed the trajectory of my life. I think one of the biggest things that I learned in college is like that personal development. It had nothing to do with the school and the degree that I had. I can argue that the personal development that I did on my own was almost more impactful than the things I learned in school, or it at least helped me apply the things that I learned, because now I have my own personal vision that I'm moving towards. And now each class is just a log adding to the fire that I am, versus I think a lot of people go, okay, what is this class is going to make me on this pathway
Hmm.
versus I have a pathway and I'm using the world and environment, everything as an opportunity to build this vision that I want to create.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I can see where you're coming from, where you talk about how going to school wasn't necessarily as valuable as you doing your personal development. And I would agree because, of course, you learn stuff for your degree while you're in school and it helps you to be able to get a job. But one thing I'll say is that the stuff that I've learned from the books doing personal development has been much more valuable. But, of course, I paid much less to get the information. With a self-improvement book like Think and Grow Rich or something like that, what do you pay? $10, $15.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, for the college education that we both got, we were paying tens of thousands every year, all for one to be more valuable, more useful than the other. And it's kind of crazy to think about that.
Yeah, but I'm also not in the camp though of saying like, okay, yeah, don't go to school, don't go to college because
Oh
like
yeah, not saying that. No,
yeah,
no.
yeah. But I think that camp exists
Mm-hmm.
out there. That's like, just read my book. You don't need to.
Right.
It's the people who are saying, oh, you don't need
uh,
school who are selling you the content. Well, yeah,
right.
I think that it's the culmination. It taught
Mm-hmm.
me how to use that, right? It's like
Right.
school is the vehicle, but it taught me that I'm in the driver's seat. So it's like, yeah, school is the vehicle and the education is the vehicle, but like you're the driver. And so ultimately your goal is I want to get here to there. I don't care if my car gets me there or the train gets me there or whatever gets me there. It's like personal development is like working on the driver, and then
Mm-hmm.
everything else is the vehicle. I think that's a good way to break it down.
Yeah, it makes sense. And of course, I'm not saying that getting a college degree is invaluable. It's just that as far as shaping the trajectory of your life and setting goals and having a direction and actually making the impactful changes, I would say that personal development had a much greater effect in that aspect of my life than going to school. Going to school was a vehicle that was used, to use that same analogy, to get to a certain point to be able to get income and such. But I would say that the personal development part, the part for the driver, has made the biggest difference. I mean, think about
Yeah.
NASCAR. All the people in NASCAR have fast cars that are performing at the peak level of
Yeah.
machinery, but it comes down to who the driver is, right?
Yeah, that's facts. As you were saying that, I kind of had the mindset shift of like education is actually just one component of personal development. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're thinking about education as up here and then personal development down here. But I think personal development is the point. Like, why else get an education? So that you can develop yourself so that you can have skills in the workplace, right? And so I
Right.
think that personal development is the overarching. Then you have education, then you also have health, and then you have, spiritual well-being, and then you have all these other things. I think ultimately at the top is that personal development because at the end of the day, like, what are you doing, right?
Right. And honestly, I don't think that most people think of it in that aspect because I don't think that most people actually have a focus on personal development. At
Mm,
least I know personally that whenever I initially went to go to school, that the goal was to get a degree and get a job. That was the pinnacle. But once I started to read the books and everything, I started to see that there was more to life than just, I guess, working a job, if that makes sense. There's so many different aspects or things about yourself that you can grow to be able to get better results in all different aspects of your life. And so I'm glad that you pointed that out, that we should make education a part of the total personal development and get benefits from it in that way, as opposed to some people making it the main focus or making the job the main
yeah,
focus. The focus should
yeah,
be being that best version of yourself, right? If
yeah.
I'm understanding what you're saying correctly.
Yeah, no, I think that that's so true because once you graduate, a lot of times people's education stops. But your
Right.
personal development and so that's at the top, then you stop growing as a person. But personal development is at the top, and education was just the vehicle you used just then. As soon as you graduate, you're like, okay, well, where am I learning? Where am I getting new information? And you go seek that out, and then you keep developing. And I believe that especially us in our in our early 20s, we're just finishing college. But I believe that the people who are doing that personal development now you're going to start to see that change over 2, 3, 4 years. And it's crazy because I see it. I see it like some of the people that I know who are friends who people can stagnate or you can get beat down by the world. Because especially when you're starting off, you're considered a novice. And there's a lot of people have ranks that they need to go up. And that takes a toll on people. And I've been able to see that. But it's the people who continue to input, output, update, and continue that process who are able to rise above that. And then it'll get like part of their light taken out by the world, telling them you're just at the beginning, you don't know anything yet, right? You gotta, do this desk job. It's a switch. It's tough for people in our early 20s, but I believe that you have to build yourself up out of things rather than like try to enter someone's system and rise up. Right.
I'm glad you pointed that out. And so something else from one of your past answers I also wanted to touch on. You talked about input and output, and I think recalibrating was the other one, but I wanted to ask about input.
Mm-hmm.
And so I assume, or at least from my experience, it seems like it's just like if for let's say you had a diet, the type of food that you put into your body is going to affect the type of results that you get physically. And
Mm-hmm.
so as far as the input portion of your personal development, would you say that the content that you take in, the different ideologies that you pay attention to kind of have a similar effect on that output that you're talking about?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you are what you eat, right? You are
Right.
what you listen to. I mean, right, think about this. You ever hear a song that you love, right? And then the next day or a couple days later, you hear the song going in your head, even when you're not listening to it. You hear the lyrics of that artist. So like
Right.
whose ideas do you want circulating in your mind, in your subconscious 2-3 days after, right? Do you
Right.
want like 2 Chainz, or do you want like this audio book that's telling you things that's going to help you, advance? And I'm not gonna lie, like music is dope, and I'm not saying like replace all entertainment with that, but it's a diet. The things that you ate 2-3 days ago like affect how you feel today, in the same way that the things that you watch, the things that you listen to, they stay with you, and it's all about diet. That's how I think about that input piece, and that affects output. Whatever quality gas you put in your car, or whatever you eat as an athlete, right? If you want to be a top athlete, you're not eating Krispy Kreme every day. It's just that's gonna impact your output in the same way that the music you listen to affects your mindset later on, or the people that conversations that you have. People are really negative, that impacts you.
Right.
And I was talking to a coaching client the other day, and we talk about negative thoughts. And there's a guy out there named Dr. Amen, and he talks about ants, ANT, automatic negative thoughts. And it talks about how if you're at a picnic, sometimes ants can come by, and that's the same way like negative thinking. But if you hang around negative people, you get covered with their ants too, and you start to notice a difference in your thinking as well.
Okay. Would you say something similar happens like with YouTube, social media, and all that too, taking in all that negative, or let's say maybe unproductive content from those mediums? Would you say that also has a similar effect on output?
I believe that it can, but I also believe that things are more about approach than position, or like the actuality of it, right? So I could watch The Simpsons, and that could be considered, I guess like junk to some people. But let's say I'm a screenwriter, right? And I'm thinking about, wow, this is one of the most successful sitcoms ever. It's been going on for decades. Like, how do they write their characters? Why is it that people like this? So if I go in with that approach and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, how did that scene make me feel from that perspective? And how can I use that in my output? Then that's very productive.
Right.
But
So
if I'm
being
just
intentional.
yeah, exactly. But I'm just mindlessly going through that, watching it, and I'm allowing that to change like how I speak and how I'm interacting with people, and that's like less than where I believe I should be. So it's not about the Simpsons episode. It's about your approach to it more so.
Okay. I like that, being intentional about what you're looking at and actually
Yes.
having something in mind that you want to gather from that content that you're taking in, and making sure that that's what you receive from it. And so
Right.
I guess when you think about it from that perspective, nothing will really be junk unless you're just looking at it passively, unless you're just getting on YouTube and you just see all these videos and recommend it, and you say, oh, this looks interesting, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
But when you're going on there and you're trying to find specific information, that's when it gets to the point to where you can make something positive out of really any type of content, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's a very optimistic perspective too. I think that there is a limit to it, right? Like, it doesn't matter my mindset. If I'm eating donuts, like that's no matter what I do, like that's not the ideal, right? So like,
Right.
it could be an hour watching The Simpsons, or it could be an hour watching this lecture, or watching a documentary, or something else more productive. And like, maybe with that same approach, I could get more out of better quality content. But I'm saying like, even in those scenarios, I believe that you can glean some value. But it's also about like what quality are you going to glean that value from? And I believe that there's a difference between mediums and content that you consume.
Okay. And so I like that. I like that you brought that up. And so something else I wanted to touch on to change gears a little bit
Okay.
is the term self-actualization. So in the past, I've heard you mention that. And so if I'm correct, that comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so for the people listening that might not be familiar, could you give a brief explanation of what self-actualization is?
Yeah. So Maslow hierarchy of needs, it's like it's a pyramid. And I think a lot of people have heard of this, but at the bottom, it talks about like what are the human needs, and you need to cover each base before you're able to rise up to the next level. And at the bottom, I believe it's like just physical needs, like do you know where your next meal is coming from? Are you warm? Right? Are you safe?
Mm-hmm.
And the next, I think it's like social security. Like, do you have good people around you? I'm not sure exactly every step. I'd have to look at it. But at the top of the pyramid, once you have these needs met, it's self-actualization, and that's when you're really just striving to be the best version of yourself. Now, self-actualization is a term that's come up, but I realized more recently that I do have some like not conflict with it. Well, I guess it is internal conflict with the concept about it. And he actually even changed it towards the end of his life. But essentially, self-actualization is just striving to be the best version of yourself, maximizing your potential, all those buzzwords that you hear in the personal development space.
Right. And so, I mean, it's good that you might have some different like things that you don't agree with, because I would say there's no such thing as a perfect ideology. There should be things that you agree and disagree with, or I guess disagree with all different ideologies. And so I think that by, at least having awareness of it and seeing the good aspects of it, positives can come from that, especially from what I've seen about it. And so has self-actualization, or at least up until now, had it always been the end goal for you? Or if not, what caused you to set your focus on activating your full potential?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the benefit of, or one of the insights of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that the desire to be the best version of yourself is a natural biological process. And I think that's good to note, that when people are healthy and when they have their needs met, their natural desire is to be the best version of themselves. And I think that that's a beautiful way to look at humanity. So when you see people who are doing things that aren't productive, or you see people who are doing things that are destructive, that means that some level at that hierarchy, their needs aren't really being fulfilled, and they're doing that because of that lack. And if you can fix that, then the natural process of a human being would then to be the best version of themselves, to be productive for society. So that's kind of the perspective I take. Remind me of your question again.
Yeah. So the other question was, has self-actualization always been the end goal for you? Or if not, what caused you to set your focus on activating your full potential?
Yeah. So to answer that question, I believe that it's a natural thing, right? So kids, they dream. I want to be this, I want to be that, because they don't have any, they haven't been told they can't yet. And I believe that's a very fundamental part of being a human being, is you want to actualize, what you could actually be. It's not till after, that slights happen, you experience failures, and your light starts to get dimmed down as these needs aren't met, or as external barriers kind of distort your view of what's possible. So I believe that it's a natural kind of thing that happens. And then fortunately, I think my parents created a good environment for me to grow up and be disciplined, so that I believe that things are possible. And then I had a foundation so that when other things came up, I knew that, hey, that's not who I am. And that's, I think, one of the benefits of just having faith. I'm a man of faith, I'm Christian. And I believe that that's something that has been an anchor for me, understanding that who I am and my identity is rooted in something outside of what people say that I am, and what my environment might tell me that I am as a Black male, or I'm this or I'm that. It's like, no, at a deeper level, I have a strong core sense of identity, as a child of God, or, other things like that are rooted in who I am, that allow me to not sway as much when my environment is telling me I'm less than, or is this or is that.
Okay. Yeah, that's understandable. And I can see where you're coming from. And maybe to make the question a little bit more concise, what I was more so getting at is what made you actively pursue it, or just to give my perception. I would say that there was a point in time in my life where, maybe some of these other needs weren't being met. And that probably resulted in self-actualization, or, reaching my full potential, not even being something that was on my radar, at least to actively set goals to work towards. And so, of course, everyone has like an idea of who they want to be, or what like their ideal life would be. The ideal Kamani Randall, I always had that in my head, who I wanted to be. But there was a difference between having that image in my head and actually doing the work like I'm doing now to actively pursue developing the skills to be that person and to have that lifestyle that I want. And so more so what I was getting at was that, or here's maybe a better way to phrase it. when did you get to that point to where you were consciously looking at the ideal Tim Harrison and you
Mm,
started making those efforts to actively pursue that?
yeah, okay, I see. And I'd say like that's always the path. I think that's the path of a human being. And then it's like you go from fuzzy and it just gets more refined. So as a kid, like my parents gave me a poster that said you could be anything you want to be. It's a young black boy sitting on a basketball looking up, and there's an older black man with a, he's a doctor, another one's in the NBA, another one's a lawyer, one's an architect. And so like I always had that sense of possibility. Like I wanted to do that. I just didn't know what. Now, okay, I know I'm going to do well in school because that's going to move me closer to that, but I don't know what I'm going to major in yet. And I think as you get older, you start to like zero in on what that is. And
Right.
then it's like certain events either make you realize that, okay, a certain pathway is exciting to me or is possible. And that opens up the action that you take to move towards it. Right. And
Right.
so even as a kid, I would set goals like 6 months from now, I want to be here in this level. And I think like from there, it gets more and more targeted to now like I have, plans where I want to be in the next 5 years and like what am I doing this month that's going to move me forward to that.
Right.
But it's been a constant like refinement. And it still is a constant refinement. It changes, but it's you
Mm-hmm.
kind of zero in on directions and then it could change as you change, but I think
Right.
it's a constant refinement.
Or I guess from the way that I'm looking at it too, I can say that there was a defining moment in my life to where when it got to that point, that was when I started to make the conscious decision to start pursuing something. Because yeah, I can see what you're saying about how, it's kind of fuzzy at first whenever you're a kid and it's not as focused, but as you just gain age, then that's when you start to become more focused and have stronger goals and such. But I would say one of the things that was at least like a catalyst for me to actually look for ways to activate my potential was a certain event in my life that happened that made me see what my potential was. And then from there,
Mhm.
I started to use, or I guess, use that confidence I gained from seeing what my potential was and applied it in other areas that I wanted to activate my potential in. Because
Yeah.
the first area, even though it was something that I was good at, it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do long term, but that was at least the catalyst that made me think, okay, I have potential. I can do something. I can be this person.
Yeah.
Let me actually start making a
Yeah.
plan to do it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And I've definitely had like several events that were catalysts. Like one of them, I talk about this one a lot, but I had a coach when I was in high school. I was in eighth grade, actually. He was the high school basketball coach. I was at a school called Horizon Christian. And his name was Coach T. And that's part of the
Mhm.
reason why I go by Coach T. But I remember I was walking at the gym and,
Mhm.
he was standing next to me and he said, "Hey, Tim, what college do you want to play for?" Right. And at the time, I played basketball, I was passionate about it. I started realizing, hey, I'm pretty good. I might like take this seriously, but I never thought about what college I want to go to. And when he said that, I was kind of like taken aback, and I was like, you think I could play in college?" And he looked at me like, it's like, yeah, like, what are you doing? Like, yeah. And just the look on his face of like, duh, is what like kind of like, oh, he believes that. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm playing in college from now on. Like, okay, yeah, let me like think about it. Let me focus that. But I remember it expanded how I viewed myself. Next thing,
Ah,
when I'm in college, I'm playing basketball and I'm realizing, okay, you know what? I'm not like on that trajectory to play in the NBA, right? So I was like, okay, that was my dream. And then that was a little bit of an identity kind of shock or crisis. But I had a teacher, Dr. Hebel, who's a psychology professor. She kind of took me under her wing and I had this new interest in people and stuff. And so I remember she sat me down and on the back of an envelope, she wrote, I was asking her, hey, what is this psychology thing like? What does that actually look like in a career? And she was like, okay, well, you can do this, this, and this. You can go to this kind of school. I'll write you a recommendation. Just keep this kind of GPA. You'll be good. Is that you're in good standing. And then 5 years from now, you could be making this. And then she circled a number. And I was just like, oh wow, like I never thought about how much money I wanted to make. I never thought about that. And I was like, wow, I'm like, hey, that's a lot of money. And I was like, okay, like I'm on this pathway. It's gonna be hard, but like I would be doing this and it looked like, and it just made it real for me. And I'm like, wow, this person is very established in her career and she sees that I could do this. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's cool. And I'd say like the last moment that I had like that kind of realization was it wasn't sparked from someone else. And I think the time that it was sparked within me was the most significant one. And this happened like fairly recently in 2020.
mhm.
And when COVID hit, and then all the social unrest was going on, and just 2020 was just a crazy year. it was also the year I was graduating, and I'm already, okay, I had a job lined up in strategy consulting, but I'm transitioning from being a student to a working adult. And so that's a major like life biographical like shift, right? So I'm
Right.
thinking about, what is it that I want to be? What is my why? Like what kind of impact do I want to have on the world? And then the racial unrest like goes down when I graduate, and I'm just like, I felt called to do something. And it was then I sat down and I was just like, okay, well, who do I want to be? Like, I want to do what makes me come alive, right? Um, and I remember writing down like different areas of my life where I wanted to be. And that was like, I really sat down and thought about this. And I was like, okay, let me start moving towards this. And I still kind of have that more concrete plan. And I've been executing on that for the last maybe 10 to 11 months. And I think like that time, it was like, it wasn't external, like someone believed that I could do this. Like I had the belief in myself, but I still had to cast it out, then look at it on the page. I'm like, that looks like a good life. Like that would be worth any effort that it would take to get there. And then I started executing towards that. And, it's been a hell of a journey. And that journey right there is what I call the enjoyable pain of growth. And that's what I named the company after and everything. So
Yeah, man,
long story short.
yeah. And so that's a major jump, something that most people probably can't do, to be able to go from having a job lined up in strategy consulting, which is a well-paying career, to decide to do something that aligned with your talents and what your passions were. And so if you don't mind, could you talk about some of the thoughts that were going through your head whenever you made that decision and decided to commit to EPOG 100%?
Yeah, it was a lot. That was a huge decision, and it took a while. Like at first, look, to be honest, it was just a pandemic, right? I'm just in the house. I just graduated. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing anything, right? And I have all this energy, and I have all these new ideas. I was like, okay, like I was just restless too, so I wanted to start something, and then I was like, okay, there's a need for it. Like like ticked off, and I was provoked by what was going on in our country. I was like, okay, well, what piece of this can I make an impact on? I was still fully planning on going to Accenture and going to that job. But then I started doing this. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I could incorporate 501c3. And I got a couple of people to be on the board of advisors, right? And then I had an opportunity to become a coach. And then I'm with a peer coach, and I tell them my mission. They're like, hey, you need to meet this person. I meet this person. They're in a similar position where they want to do more. They're in their job thinking about quitting. And they love the vision that I had for EPOG Academy. Then they quit their job and came. And so I'm like, okay, well, this person is like really committed too. Like I still hadn't quit my job yet, or I hadn't turned that down, or
Right.
so I knew I needed to make a decision. And so like as we got closer, things started to grow and build, and then we secured a program for the fall. And I was like, okay, all right, yeah, I don't think I'll be able to do both. So it's like, okay, now I'm 23 years old. Do I turn down like this 6-figure offer to do this uncertain thing that's a nonprofit that's like not promised or anything? But I remember it was actually in a coaching session that I realized that it was a major decision about like who I wanted to be. Do I want to just focus on building my own empire? Right? If I wanted to do that, that would be about me. That would be more about me. And I was like, you know what? My life isn't about me. I don't want to live my life about me. I want to impact other people. And I believe that this pathway is the vehicle that I want to develop on right now. Right. And that's how I see
Right.
it. It's nothing against if you want to work as a consultant. Like I was so excited to do that. And I think that that would have utilized my talents too. But I was just like, just the specific things that I would be doing on a regular basis, the impact that I would have, and the ways that I would develop were more closely aligned to that vision that I had, and would allow that freedom. And it's the option that scared me more. And I was like, you know what? I want to see what I'm made of. Like, this is not certain. Like, I don't know where I'm going to make my money from. I don't know what, but like, I believe that I'm just going to step out in faith and see what happens. And like, I was like, I want to see what I'm made of. What do I want to tell my kids, grandkids, like that I responded during the pandemic and during when all this went down, right? What did I do? What did Tim do? How did he respond? I was like, this makes the better story, right? And so
Definitely. Yeah.
so I took that leap, and it was probably one of the best decisions that I've made, and I don't even know to the full extent that that statement is true yet.
I love that, man. And I respect that a lot. You had the courage to take that jump, especially coming right out of school with all this uncertainty and everything that was going on. I respect that a lot. You know, I'm pretty much in the exact same situation, almost except on the other side of it,
Mhm.
where, coming out of school and taking a job offer, and instead of, I guess you could say, burning my ships, like the Hernan Cortez story, kind of like how you did, I'm doing, I guess, the other side of that, which is, I'm working the job, but I happen to come across something I'm really passionate about that I'm doing on the
Mm.
side. And so I respect it a lot. It takes a lot of boldness to do what you did. And then especially not even being from Texas either. Like I'm from Beaumont, Texas. So I'm only an hour and a half from home. And so for you to come all the way from San Diego and then coming here for school and making that jump, and being in a city where, I don't know how familiar you are with people around here or how many connections you have, but it's just, probably scary. And so that's just something that I respect a lot, man.
No, I appreciate that, man. And I don't want to downplay anyone's path, right? Everyone has a different pathway to get there, and none is more glamorous. It's all about how do you live the story. It's all about how do you live the story and what is your approach, right? And so you could be in that job, and maybe you can still actualize your potential within the organization. And plenty of people can, and plenty of people do. And so it's not about what pathway looks the most sexy, or do I take that leap? It's like the leap looks different for everyone, right? The leap
Right.
looks different for everybody. So I think some people shouldn't be entrepreneurs because it's stressful. It's a lot of, if you have low tolerance for like uncertainty, like that might not be the
Might
path
not
of
be
your
cut out for that,
actualization.
right?
You know what I mean? Like that might not be it. And that doesn't mean you're better or worse. It's just like you might be a stud, like within the structures of an organization. You know how to work it. You know how to work your way to the top, get the best out of the people around you. So it's like, it's really an internal thing. It's not about, okay, taking this leap, starting my company, doing it on my own, independent, right? It's all about like, okay, what am I wired for? And what is it that makes me come alive truly at my core? And then what in the world is a vehicle for that? Don't think like, okay, what job is going to give me the status? What job is going to give me this? It's like, whatever is out there, like first look inside, like what actually moves me physically, viscerally, what excites me, what makes me scared, what does my body respond to now? And then it's like, okay, where could that be applied? Because any system that we have is built because humans have the proclivity towards certain tasks, right? There wouldn't be engineers, or there wouldn't be different fields, researchers, if like that wasn't innately something that people did or were wired to do, right? And so you can almost take an inside out approach of looking, what am I uniquely wired to do? And there's clues, and you have to learn how to recognize those clues and then build up and see like, okay, where can that be applied to make a difference?
Okay. I like the way that you explained that and how you talked about how the different paths might not be for certain people because they might have guys that would listen to this and, they might, even though that's not what we said, they might perceive it as if we're saying, oh, you shouldn't work a corporate job or something like that. But, that's not what we're saying at all. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, some people just might not be geared for that sort of thing, just like some people might not be geared towards entrepreneurship. And it just comes from building the self-awareness, doing the personal development to know yourself and know where you can thrive and know where at the end of the day, I guess when you die, you can be satisfied with the impact that you made in whatever role it was that you chose to take, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly.
Yeah, no, that's spot on, man. That's spot on.
Okay. Okay. And so we talked about the benefits that come from it mentally, where you having that alignment has, given you that rush, I guess you could say, that motivation to do more. But I'd also like if you could touch on some of the challenges that you faced on your journey to self-actualization. They could be social, mental, spiritual, whatever, anything that you like to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, the path of growth isn't fun all the time. It's like
Right.
it's synonymous with challenge. And you grow to the degree that you expose yourself to things that are outside of your comfort zone, right? And so
Exposure.
like you don't actually grow until you feel uncomfortable, right? A lot of people say when you're lifting weights, it's not until those reps where you actually like, yo, this struggles, that the growth actually occurs. So the first 8 are just to get you to that point where the growth occurs, right? And it's like those
Right.
2, 3, 4, or 5, or 6. Oh, the last like 2 or 3 or 4 are the ones where all the growth occurs because your muscles grow when you tear them, right? And so it's not until you feel that tear, that burn, that you actually receive the growth. And so that happens in every single area. And one of the things that I've learned, especially as being a coach, is that it's inside out. This world is inside out, but it's going to tell you it's outside in. And the ones who realize it's inside out are the ones who rise to the top. It's like if you're underwater and you're full of air, you're going to naturally rise. So it's like, it's whatever's inside of you is what determines your level. And what I mean by that is like, as a coach, let's say if I'm struggling and I'm not being productive and I'm procrastinating, I'm not going to fully be able to help someone with their procrastination. And it's not that I need to know the strategies. It's just like my presence and how I'm able to respond do I know how to ask the right question? Like I won't be able to reach them. I'll have a cap on how I can lead others. So it's like whatever level of personal development I'm at, that and below is like how I can help people. But as I have breakthroughs, I'm able to see new levels of perspective that allow me to show up more effectively for my clients, in my relationships, etc. So while doing this, starting a company, trying new fields, being on stage, it's bringing all those insecurities, those things that you haven't worked on to the forefront, because you might be able to get away with, personality, a little skills first, but then it's like, oh, okay, this component of my life is now showing up and it's front and center. And that's the thing in the way from me moving higher. You'll exhaust all your skills and your talents, and that'll get you to a certain level, but it's constant. It has to be holistic. Otherwise, it'll put a cap at how high you can go.
Okay. Okay. And I think that's definitely something that's unique to someone doing personal development, of course, because, for someone that doesn't have that focus, they wouldn't really see how, I guess, those lapses that they're having, those places where they aren't fully developed, are affecting other people until they develop an eye for it from doing the personal development stuff. And so I like that you touched on that. But something that, I guess, to rephrase the question to get more along the lines that I was thinking of was how what are some of the challenges that you would say play out like for you personally? So not necessarily, with being able to help others, because of course that's going to come with it whenever you're doing something like what you do with the coaching and everything. Your limitations are going to affect the product that you bring. But I was more so going on the lines of how has you working towards being the best version of Tim affected you, let's say, with your social interactions? Has it made it to where things have become difficult with friends, family, in any type of way? Spiritually, just that type of stuff, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. So definitely, I'll speak to the social component of it too. When you work on yourself, that can create a strain on your relationships, and it can enhance your relationships as well, right? So what happens is, you're like the 5 people that you spend the most time with kind of anchors you in a lot of ways. Like whether it's like what you eat, what you listen to, what you watch, like it's a lot very social. So if you have friends that eat very unhealthy, well, when you hang out with them, what do you guys eat? So then now you start to adapt their habits and you want to go to the same places, right? And
Right.
so as you're growing and as you raise your standards for different things, it can have the impact of isolating yourself from people who don't also have those, right? So if you want to hang out and you want to go on a hike, you want to go do healthy activities because you want to be more productive, you don't want to just go drink and smoke every time you guys hang out, because that's getting in your way if you do it too much, right? So you want to do this, there might be like, well, why are you trying to work out, be all productive? And then they'll be like, nah, let's just chill, let's just relax, right? And that can have the effect of pulling you back. And there is space to relax. Doesn't mean everything has to be productive, but at a certain point, as you change your mindset and how you look at the world, you guys just don't have the same map that you're operating on, and that can create tension. The positive side of that is you have to be willing to let certain relationships go if they're holding you back. And you have to understand where you're trying to go and what's most important. Is it maintaining so that they like me? Is it shrinking down so that they don't feel, like I'm trying to be better than them or whatever it is? Or do I allow certain relationships, certain habits to die so that new ones can form, right? So it wasn't so my business partner, he's someone who has high standards as well. And we vibe on a lot of different areas, but I've had friends who, whenever I'm back in town, they just want to go do this and do that. And I know that that's taking me away from my mission and my purpose. But I had to allow myself to not spend as much time with them, but that creates the space to build relationships with people who are going to where I want to go. And ultimately, then that has the effort of pulling you up. Because let's say they eat healthier than you, they want to work out a little harder than you. Now you're like, okay, no, I'm not going to let them outwork me. I'm not going to. And so now it's pulling you versus pulling you back. And that's the difference. You shoot for it with that.
Right. And this is important. I'm glad that you brought it up because I feel like there's so much of a stigma behind this in a way. And here I'll elaborate. Whenever you're doing something in life, whenever you're making progressions, whenever you're trying to pursue different goals than what you were before, when you decide to make those changes in your life, something that, you've probably experienced, and I've experienced it as well, and a lot of people talk about it, is that the people that you would normally used to hang out with, that you normally used to spend most of your time with and had the same hobbies, interests, principles, and that sort of thing, it doesn't always go over well whenever you start making those choices to lead a better life. People say things like, oh, you changed up. Or, you've even heard celebrities talk about this. Of course, we're not celebrities or anything, but
Yeah.
how people say they went Hollywood because they don't do the same things they did whenever they were, let's say back in the neighborhood, whenever they were, in their teenage years or in high school. And so I'm glad that you touched on this because you get there's such a negative connotation that kind of comes with that. But the thing about it is that it's really necessary, at least I would say, because there's no way in the world that you can continue to do the same stuff you're doing before and expect different results. That's insanity. And so I don't think that people should be ashamed to make lifestyle changes and to see that some of those past relationships that they had are just eventually going to run their course, just like any relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to feel like you're better than,
Yeah,
or
not at
you
all.
have to like rub it in their face, or that it even has to be like overt. But you have to, decide at the end of the day, like what's most important and what relationships do I want space for? Because relationships are important and those are just facts. Now it's a matter of, okay, well, what relationships do I want to invest in? It really comes down to habits and standards, right? And your standards determine your habits. What standards do I allow in my life? Whether it's my diet, whether it's like how much do I work out and whatnot. And it's like, I either allow this or I allow this, and this is going to give me these results. This is going to give me these results. And where am I willing to give and take? And how do I live in alignment with that on a regular basis? That determines your level in life and it determines the results that you get.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that you brought this point up. And I also liked how you touched on how it doesn't necessarily make you better. You don't want to look at it from the perspective of, oh, I'm better. I actually made an episode about this called Build Your Championship Team, but
Mm-hmm.
I use like a sports analogy in it. But what I was saying is that you can't judge somebody by the rules of your game when they're playing a different game. Like if you're trying to win a, let's say, NBA championship, you wouldn't go find a hockey team. You're playing for a Stanley Cup. And so it's all really just a perspective thing. You want to align with people who are playing the same game as you, that want to win that Super Bowl or that championship, not, the Stanley Cup or whatever else. They're just playing by different rules in life. And yeah, it's just not going to work for you if you're trying to make those changes. So I'm glad that you touched on that.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I love that. I love that sports analogy for sure. It's like, what game are you playing? Because there's different rules to win in that game, right? So some people play the status game, and to win, you got to rise. You got to have the name association. You got to have the dollar in your account, right? Some people play the popularity game. They don't care as much about that. That might help in the game. There might be some overlap in rules, but at the end of the day, they'll take a job with a higher position or title where they're higher esteemed, but it might pay less. Versus if someone is just playing the wealth game, they don't care what the title is. It's like, how much am I making, right? And that's your
Right.
standards, which will then determine your habits and what will I do and what will I reinforce. But that's so true. And it's just about like, what game are you playing? You need to know what game you're in, because otherwise you won't be good at it. And otherwise, the results that you get, you won't be able to predict. But once you decide what game you're playing, that tells you the rules. And you could change games, but you're in a game whether you like it or not. It's just like, am I gonna be intentional about playing it, and am I gonna learn the rules? And then once you learn the rules, then you can change it. Then you could change the game once you master the rules. And that's the cool thing about it.
Great. I like that. I like that. And so, for the people listening right now that are eager to start working on being the best version of themselves, what are some initial tips that you give them to at least be able to get started?
I'd say great job, because you already started. You're listening to the Himprovement podcast right now. So that means that you could be listening to a lot of different things right now, but you decided that, hey, I'm going to invest in this and myself. I'm going to listen to this. And the next step I'd say is like, do it, right? As you're listening to this, ask yourself, okay, so what, right? Tim's saying some things, Kamani's saying some things, but what am I actually going to apply? How is this going to change what I do tomorrow, today, this week? And answer that question and go do it, because otherwise this doesn't mean anything. And it's so easy to get caught in this personal development trap of, I got to read this next book. I got to read this book. I got to read that book. It's not about the book. The books, the education, The seminars, the tapes are all logs in the fire, but the fire is already alive in you right now. Now you have to fan the flame and you have to feed the flame, right? So what are the things in your life that douse your flame? What are the things that ignite you? Answer those questions and set this thing ablaze.
Hey, I like the analogies. You're coming up with a lot of analogies for this episode, stoking
Mm-hmm.
the flame. And so, would you recommend that these people look into coaching?
Yeah, I'd say, how serious are you towards getting where you want to go, right? There's a lot of tools, and I believe that coaching has been a tool that changed the game for me. Obviously, I'm a coach now too, and I get a lot of and I see the impact that I'm able to have on my clients. So I believe that coaching is one of those great tools that you can add to your arsenal to fan your flame. But I would say it's kind of like I actually read an article yesterday. Someone who was a coach, they said, when you are taking off, if you're a pilot, every degree that you're off target equates to about 60 miles, when you get there, right? Because it's so long, right? And so if you're thinking in the big picture, the long game, where do you want to end up? And if you're off a degree or 2 or 3 or 5 degrees, how far off of, your vision are you going to be? And I think a coach is a great tool and resource to make sure that you're on track. Also to vision, where do you actually want to go and to get clarity? And so I'd say if you're serious about getting to where you want to be in the long run, I'd say a coach is an awesome investment. And it's yeah.
Okay. And so, what would you say are some of the most common things that people who are looking for coaching struggle with?
Hmm. A lot of times people don't know, where to apply it. Like by the time they're seeking out a coach and they want a coach, they want things to be better. They might have an idea of how, but they might not know either how to get there, or it's a lot of fuzziness, right? Before we talked about, a lot of times our dreams are just abstract, they're fuzzy. It's about how do we increase the resolution of where I actually want to be. And then it's like part of them kind of don't think that they could do it on their own too. A lot of it is confidence. Um, they don't want to do it alone, but it's also so many different things come up, and it's really dependent on each person. But it's like they don't like where things are going in this area, or they recognize that I can be better. Maybe things are going well, but like I have more in me, and I think that out of all the tools, I think coaching has gotten potential that was dormant in me out more than anything else, because they're trained to like know like what are you not saying, and they know your goal and they've gotten to know you, and they're like, okay, there's this blind spot, but they're not going to beat you over the head. They help you see it. They reflect things back. They ask you the questions to bring it out in a way that I think reading a book doesn't help you see your blind spot necessarily. Sometimes you need that direct feedback and reflection, and then accountability and support. So I'd say, yeah.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from. And so, another question about coaching is, how would you describe the ideal coaching client? What kind of mindset do they come in with?
Hmm. Curious. Um, they're intentional. Being intentional, like they know, they're gonna do, the things that you say. They're gonna apply it, right? Because we can have major breakthroughs in a session, but if you don't do anything in the weeks between sessions, like nothing happens. It doesn't matter how great of a coach I am. Like it's all, it's on them. So the people who are gonna apply it are the ones who get the best results, and they're the most fun to work with, um, as well. Yeah, and then yeah. I'd say, people who are curious, who are open to exploring new things. Like, hey, I haven't tried this. Let me try it out. And they ask you questions sometimes too. Like, hey, what do you see here? Is there something I'm not seeing? Um, and then being intentional about doing the work. Those are the ones who have the greatest experience and have the best results.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up the interview. I think we touched on some extremely helpful topics. I think we shared some gems, really good information. And so, before we go ahead and wrap it up, is there any other information that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, most definitely. I'd love to connect with you guys and hear your insights from this. And if you're interested in coaching, just reach out to me. Follow me on Instagram, Coach Timothy John. That's Coach Timothy John on Instagram. Just honestly hit me up if any of this was valuable to you, or if you applied any of this. I'd love to hear, how that impacted you, or if you're interested in hearing more about coaching and what that might look like. feel free to hit me up. Make sure you let me know that you're from the Himprovement podcast. Maybe we could work out a kind of deal or something like that. But
All right.
yeah, just follow me. I do music too, and I'd love to connect with you guys and see what's going on in your world.
All right. Sounds good. And all of his links will be in the description of this episode. You'll see them in the description on the podcast episodes, as well as in the YouTube video description. And so that's pretty much everything. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, appreciate you you having me, Kamani.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Take care.